If your home sits on the market for 30 days in Lancaster, you've already lost money and most sellers don't even realize it. In this video today, I'm going to show you how to price your home correctly in Lancaster, the biggest pricing mistakes sellers make, and why testing the market can backfire. So how does pricing actually work in Lancaster? Now, Lancaster is a very price-sensitive market, especially in the $250,000 to $500,000 range. Buyers today are watching interest rates very closely, they're comparing multiple homes online instantly, and they know the value better than ever. Now, your home doesn't get judged in a vacuum, it gets compared to every other home that is available. So this is why pricing correctly isn't just about what you want, it's about how your home stacks up against the others. When figuring out what price to put your home at, you want to compare the pending sales and also what homes have recently sold in the last 60 to 90 days. This is going to give you an accurate representation of what buyers are actually paying for homes. And even depending on the time of year, a home that sold 3 to 4 months ago may not be giving you an accurate representation of what you could get for yours. The tricky thing for all homeowners is we think about all of the time we spent painting, decorating, and all the money we spent getting things fixed up. However, just because you spent $5,000 on designer blinds doesn't mean that potential buyers are going to see it that way. One of the biggest mistakes I see sellers making is they overprice to try and test the market. This is a huge mistake, and one of the common things I hear from potential sellers is, let's just price it higher and see what happens. Here's the reality. When you overprice your home, you miss that peak period, the first 7 to 14 days, where the serious buyers don't even come and see it. You rack up days on market, people then start to think, what's wrong with the home? As soon as this happens, you've lost a huge amount of your negotiating power and ultimately could lead you to getting worse offers. Once buyers start wondering what's wrong with it, you've lost a lot of negotiating power. And even when you reduce the price later on, it's not going to be enough to get rid of some of that doubt. Now you're negotiating from a position that's weaker. Buyers are going to expect discounts or concessions. In many cases, overpriced homes end up selling for less than if they were priced correctly from day one. And it takes longer, costing you more money out of your pocket. What are the biggest pricing mistakes that people make? Now, here are the most common ones that I see. You price based on what you need. The market doesn't care about what your next purchase is going to be or how much money you'd like to make from the sale. The market price for your property is what a willing and able buyer is willing to give you. Next up is using Zillow's estimates or Redfin or Homes.com, any of those property valuation tools. They don't account for the condition of your home, the layout, the upgrades, the location nuance, whether the next door neighbor has a big dog. Even going a couple of blocks, potentially if you're switching from one school district to another, this can have a huge impact on the property price and what you're able to get for your home. Next up is ignoring the competition. So you may want to get $400,000 for your home, let's say, but if there is a very similar home or even a better home down the street that's just come on the market for $375,000, that is going to beat you every single time. That's not to say you won't get an offer on your home. However, it might take you a little bit longer to sell and it won't be as competitive. Now, this is an incredibly difficult one, but emotional pricing. I love my home. It's worth so much more money. Ultimately, buyers don't care for the memories that you've had, for the heartache, the sweat, the blood, the tears potentially that you've poured into that property. What they care about is number of bedrooms, location, and the monthly payment. That's not to say some people won't fall in love with what you've done with the home. However, you can't use how you feel about a property to determine its market value. Why the highest offer isn't always the best. Now, the thing you have to think about is just because they give you an offer at a higher price does not guarantee that that is going to be the price that they end up purchasing the property. There are many things that can happen between going under contract and closing. They have to go through an appraisal. If they're getting inspections, those are all opportunities for a buyer to potentially renegotiate with you and get a lower price or a better deal. If you price the home properly, you can get multiple offers. You can negotiate those better terms. For example, you might be able to get yourself an appraisal gap. So if you have two sellers and they really love the property, they may be willing to pay the difference between what a bank thinks your property is worth and what they actually want to pay for it. The exception to this is if you get a cash offer. A cash does not require an appraisal. Also, looking at the different types of financing, you may have a slightly higher offer that's FHA or VA. These again can be trickier to get all the way to the closing table because the appraisers have much stricter restrictions. If you have a conventional financing, they're not going to care so much about paint or some of those minor upgrades that might need to be done. However, FHA and VA can be far more restrictive. This means a property sale can get delayed. You may have to do repairs. They may have to reduce the price or some combination of the two. And let's say the worst happens and you have to go back onto the market. This does not look very good that you went under contract and it fell through because new potential buyers are going to think, hey, what's wrong with this home? So what is the correct strategy? Now, here's what I recommend to all of my sellers. Price competitively from day one. There are multiple reasons for this, but ultimately it creates more showings, more urgency, the potential for multiple offers, and it lets the market push the price up. This stops you chasing buyers. You get to let the buyers compete with each other to get you the best terms and not just the price. When priced right, you often get fewer contingencies, less negotiation, faster closing, and stronger buyers. The goal isn't just to sell, it's to sell the best overall terms that suit you. Especially if you need to do something tricky, like you need to do a rent back or you're going to be contingent on finding a property for yourself. Having multiple offers is a good way of being able to secure yourself. Because if something does happen to your current buyer, if you've had 5 or 6 offers on a property, you can always go back to them at a later date. How to know if you've priced your home correctly? Well, unfortunately, you won't know until you've hit the market. When you've priced it correctly, it's going to get strong activity in the first 1 to 2 weeks. It attracts serious, qualified buyers, and it gives you leverage in negotiations. And in many cases, it's going to sell faster and for a better net number. I'm going to briefly break down how I managed to get my seller an additional $13,000. This is a property that I sold over in York last year. We listed it on the market for $374,900. It was a very nice home in a decent neighborhood. We listed it on a Thursday. We had 2 open houses on the Saturday and the Sunday. We ultimately got 1 offer initially, and it was pretty decent. It was a little bit above asking price, and it did have an escalation clause up to, I think it was like $391,000. Now, the good news is we did manage to delay the acceptance of this offer until the Monday. And on Monday, I managed to have another person who was interested in the property. Now, the terms weren't particularly good on this one. They were, they needed to sell a home. They were contingent on selling it, but the offer price was higher. So because we managed to wait till Monday, I managed to get that agent to write a higher offer for us. And because of that, we were able to escalate the offer, the original offer we got, up to a higher price. This meant that we managed to accept a much stronger offer or a much stronger buyer. They were putting much more money down. It was conventional financing and $13,000 on top of the actual listing price. It was also under contract in 5 days. They were already under contract on the property that we're purchasing next. So this meant we had a very short window where they were going to be paying 2 mortgages, and it worked out pretty well. However, if we listed it at a higher price, say $400,000, we may not have had the same result. For them, the peace of mind of getting it sold quickly was going to be worth way more than trying to get an extra $5,000 or $10,000 by listing it at a higher price. In the end, we made the right decision because it got under contract very quickly with favorable terms. If you're interested in learning about how to get the most amount of money possible, then click this video here when trying to sell your home. And if you want to know what the best paint colors to get the best return on investment, then click this video here.